why many spiritual seekers have been misled by these ancient scriptures or ancient religious or spiritual teachings. What are the reasons? I will speak about 4 main reasons in detail, and I will give you a technique on how to interpret it accurately. Okay, just one tip there. So if you're interested with this topic, stay tuned till the end of the video. Hi, I am Radhika Lakshmanan. I am a karma transformational guide, and I help people to break their karmic patterns and heal their emotional wounds using a very unique hypnosis method, and I also teach advanced meditation. Now let's start. Number 1. The number 1 reason why many spiritual seekers have been misled by ancient scriptures, ancient religious or spiritual teachings. Number 1, poetic languages. Okay, see, many ancient scriptures and ancient religious or spiritual teachings were written figuratively. Many of those words, okay, they often use poetic language, analogies and metaphors. Hence, they are not meant to be taken literally. However, many people misunderstood those teachings. They misunderstood those teachings because they took those words at face values. Hence, it prevents these people from grasping their deeper meanings. Let me give you an example. For example, let's say the ancient spiritual masters' words. The master said, be quiet, be still. In this particular context, be quiet and be still simply means do not react to our thoughts. Observe our thoughts without judging it, without reacting to it, and connecting to the stillness within us, a meditative state. However, many will misinterpret this message, including many spiritual teachers. They take it literally. They assume, they misunderstood that be quiet and be still means not to speak a word, or being quiet, or sitting in one position forever, being still, sitting in one position in stillness forever. Okay, so this is just a small example on how many spiritual teachers and many spiritual seekers misinterpret great ancient teachings and scriptures. This is one small example, but there are many more examples there, where they use complicated words, where they use very poetic languages, which is very difficult to be interpreted. Additionally, some ancient languages, one particular word might have few different meanings. So in order to know what is the real meaning of those words, you have to have a higher level of wisdom. You might be extremely good at those languages. It doesn't matter. If you want to know the perspective, from which perspective the master wrote those words, you need to access the wisdom within yourself. You need to operate from a higher state of consciousness. Number 2, outdated practices and advices. See, these ancient teachings and scriptures were created thousands of years ago, or hundreds or 200 years ago. Am I right? So sometimes some of those masters' advices in that scriptures or text might be applicable forever, for all eras, for all generations. Meanwhile, some other practices or advices may not be applicable for all generations, for all eras. So, those ancient masters might have recommended certain advices or practices that were suitable for that specific ancient era and lifestyle. Because you have to understand something. Ancient people's lifestyle, beliefs, societal norms and intelligence were totally different than now. Am I right? We have evolved. Human beings have evolved. Am I right? So some of the advice might be applicable forever. Meanwhile, some others might be only suitable for that particular era. And it might not be applicable for the modern world today, especially 2025. It might be an outdated advice, outdated practices. I'll give you an example, a real example. Okay. There is one famous saint, famous master, I think thousands of years ago, he created teachings. He's a good saint, wonderful saint. We can learn a lot from him. Many of his advices are applicable forever, for all eras. However, some of his advices are outdated ones, are not applicable or suitable for today's modern world. For example, he said, never listen to women's advice. Never listen to your wife's advice, something along the lines. Okay, now you have to understand one thing. This particular advice was appropriate, was relevant for those days. Why? Because those days women are not like the women today. The women today are totally different from those women in those ancient times. Those women in those ancient times were confined to their domestic roles. Their whole world is about their husband and kids. They don't have much knowledge. They had limited access to knowledge and education or outside world experience. They were not intellectually trained. Hence, they were more emotional. They were not rational. They were more emotional than rational. Am I right? Hence, that particular saint's advice was relevant for that ancient era. Because women in those days were more emotional and they didn't have much knowledge, much education. Perhaps they might not be able to help their husbands or the man in their family related to their career, to their business, to war. However, are the women today similar to those ancient women? No. Today the women are extremely intelligent, knowledgeable, highly skilled, intellectually trained. Many are scientists, doctors, engineers. I have seen many wives who are the mastermind and the driving force behind their husband's career and business. They work together. I have seen genius women out there. So they are not the same. So that particular advice is not applicable for today's era. It's not applicable, and that's the reason we need to always interpret any scriptures or ancient teachings from a place of wisdom, not simply memorizing it and preaching it like a parrot. Okay, so we are not meant to blindly follow everything. So we have to be discerning to know which is applicable and which is not applicable for today's world, to know which is outdated practices. The poor saint didn't know that some people will foolishly take his teachings out of context and mislead others. Number 3, altered information, altered scriptures and religious teachings or spiritual teachings. These ancient scriptures and texts were created many many thousand years ago, hundreds of years ago. Am I right? As these teachings were passed through generations, the institution, organization, or the middle people who led this religious or spiritual community have altered and changed the original messages, have changed the original scriptures. These selfish individuals use these teachings to control and manipulate people to obey them. Hence, they remove some of those messages, they altered some of the original messages and changed some of the original messages. Meanwhile, some religious fanatics may have altered or removed certain concepts in that original text that resemble of other religious teachings, or if it conflict their personal belief. If any of those ancient teachings or ancient practices in that particular scripture or text resemble other religious practices, or if those practices conflict their own personal belief, they will immediately remove it. They will immediately remove those concepts and replace it with something else, some other messages. Additionally, let me give you an example. For example, let's say someone who believes that God is only formless. If someone believes that God is only formless, and if they find any text in that particular ancient scriptures that support God with form, they will immediately remove it. They will immediately alter it. Do you understand? Additionally, they also remove teachings from those ancient texts that empower spiritual seekers to embrace their own power, that make them follow their own intuition. They will remove those teachings and replace it with concepts that encourage dependence on their religious institution or organization or authorities. For example, just for example, let's say these people are selfish people. They don't want you to embrace your own power. They don't want you to access to your own intuition or your own third eye. They don't want you to accept, because once you've embraced your own power, once you've accessed your third eye, you will be powerful. You will not listen to anybody's advice blindly. You will be a master. You won't be a slave. You won't be a puppet. You won't listen to all these authorities who are lying, who are misleading you. You will question them. Hence, they will remove that meditation practice. If it was suggested in the ancient practice, they will remove any text that supports meditation, and they will replace it with another concept that will brainwash you to be totally dependent on their religious or spiritual authorities or institution or organization. In fact, some of them might even encourage you or might tell you not to question the religious authorities, otherwise you'll be punished by God. Why are they doing this? Because they want to control and manipulate you to obey them all the time, to never question the authorities, so that you'll always be their puppet. They did it for their own selfish motives. Number 4, ego versus higher self. Ego versus higher self. Many of these ancient teaching cannot be fully understood from the level of mind or ego. They can only be grasped when we are spiritually awakened, or when we are operating from an expanded consciousness, or when we experience a heightened self of awareness. I'll give you a metaphor, an analogy. Let's say about viewing a building. Looking that building up close is entirely different from viewing that building from a distance. Am I right? Similarly, we have to look at these ancient teachings from a higher perspective, from a broader perspective. Our mind is filled with many prejudices, biases, and limited beliefs that will prevent us from seeing the true essence of these ancient teachings. We need to approach these teachings without biases, so that we can understand the context and perspective in which they were presented originally by those ancient masters. We need to know from which context that master had written those texts, from which perspective those masters have written those texts. Because context matters, perspective matters. Sometimes those ancient words are not poetic, are not written figuratively. They might be direct words, but those words might have written from a different perspective, a perspective that doesn't cross our mind. That particular master would have wrote that particular text from one perspective, and we might interpret it from a totally different perspective. I've seen people doing it many times. Okay, so perspective matters, context matters. So many times people are just simply reading and reciting all these ancient texts. Okay, they're just memorizing it and then reciting it and preaching it like a parrot, like a robot. These ancient spiritual texts are not meant to be taken literally. So we are not meant to memorize it and preach it like a robot, like a parrot. We are meant to look at it from a place of wisdom, from our true self, from a higher self. If we fail to do it, we might end up misinterpreting those valuable ancient scriptures or teachings, and potentially might end up misleading others as well. Let me give you an example. See, the same spiritual text, okay, each time we undergo a spiritual awakening, this same spiritual text or religious text might reveal a different meaning. Something that might be totally different from the previous meaning that we have given that text. Okay? So each time you go through a spiritual awakening, the same text might reveal a different perspective, a different meaning. Let's say, just for an example, let's say there's 3 stages of spiritual awakening. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. When you're on the stage 1, you might look at the spiritual text from one perspective. And then when you move to stage 2, that similar text might reveal a totally different meaning, might give you a totally different perspective. And then when you move to stage 3, it will reveal totally different meaning again. So we have to be careful. Let me give you an example. Many years ago, I think 10 years ago, I can't recall. Okay, many years ago, okay, before my spiritual awakening, I bought a book, a master's book. Okay, I couldn't understand a single word. I could understand the English, but I couldn't understand the meaning at all. And I slept off. 5 years later, I kept that book safely. 5 years later, after my spiritual awakening, I was called to read that book again. And this time, I could understand every single word in that book. I could understand every meaning clearly. And it awakened me. It hit my heart and soul. And I thought I was the only person who had that experience. No. There are many others who had similar experience with me. So you see, we are not meant to interpret this ancient text or any other modern spiritual text as well, okay? The particular book that I mentioned was not an ancient text, it was a modern book. Okay, so any spiritual texts are not meant to be approached from the level of mind and ego. You need to be extremely meditative. You need to be extremely wise. You need to be connected to your higher self. So one tip that I can give you right now on interpreting these scriptures or ancient teachings is meditate on that particular master who have wrote those texts, who have written those texts, who have written those scriptures or teachings, okay, who have came up with that particular concept or teachings. Meditate on that master. In your meditation, ask that master's help to interpret those texts, ancient texts. You might not immediately get a reply, but sooner or later you'll slowly start getting the downloads, the mental downloads. And you will be able to interpret those ancient texts. So let me know what you think about this issue. If you like this video, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, and please share it with others because they need to know the truth. Many are just reciting this ancient text and and just preaching it like a parrot and misleading others. So please share it with them. Let me know in the comment section about your opinion. Thank you.